Hello and welcome to Make the Logo Bigger. My name is Brenton. This podcast is your gateway into the world of advertising production, crafted especially for those who are stepping in new, aiming to become producers, or simply eager to understand the inner workings of advertising and marketing. We're here to share insights and knowledge you've been looking for, with stories, tips, and real conversations from the pros. We're simplifying the process for everyone with a production curiosity. Whether you're just starting out or keen to explore the production side of ads, you've found the right place. Let's jump in. Today's guest is Stephen Digby, a highly respected intellectual property lawyer and founder of Digby Law, with over 30 years of experience working closely with producers, freelancers, ad agencies, and production companies. In addition to his extensive legal work, Stephen has served as the legal advisor to the Commercial Producers Council for the past few years. So he knows the ins and outs of what it takes to protect your business and intellectual property in this industry. Now, before we dive in, let's make one thing clear. This chat is packed with ideas and advice, but it's definitely not legal advice. So if you're taking notes to fix your latest contract dispute, hit pause and call your lawyer first. Trust me, Stephen will thank you for it. We're here to get you thinking about the legal side of production, but always remember, nothing beats talking to your own lawyer about your specific situation. In this episode, Stephen walks us through the importance of an exit strategy in business, why you should handle tough business conversations early, and how crucial it is to have clear contracts from day one. He also gives us a crash course in avoiding common production pitfalls because, let's face it, no one wants to end up in a legal mess right before, during, or after their production. So sit back, enjoy the conversation, and remember, listen, learn, but if things get tricky, seek proper legal advice. Stephen Digby. Stephen Digby, lawyer extraordinaire, thanks for jumping on. Appreciate you taking the time to chat all things legal, but also business-wise. Do you want to give everyone just a bit of a background about who you are, how you got started, and then ultimately how you ended up in this industry that we're in?
Well, it's kind of a long story in as much as I've been essentially an intellectual property lawyer for 30 plus, probably more years. And so over those years, I've worked in-house in private practice in London for 16 years and back here for about 22 odd years. And 20 years ago, I started Digby Law as my own boutique practice. And essentially, my clients and the people that I've always worked for are people and businesses that intellectual property are their main or sometimes sole asset. And so that covers a lot of different industries over the sort of media, entertainment, arts sectors, innovation, technology sectors, as well as communication and leisure sectors. So that ranges from advertising and comms companies and agencies, television and film production, both drama and unscripted, as well as individual talent and their agencies and managers and digital startups. So I've been really doing that essentially for that very long time and just trying to act for those types of businesses to try and identify their IP, because sometimes it's something you don't actually know you have. And once you've identified it, you can try and do your best to protect it. If you need to, may need to defend it against others. But the thing that I really enjoy is try to find ways of generating value out of that IP and try to commercialize it, or, like I said, really generate value from your IP.
Throughout your journey, let's start broadly and let's talk about businesses in general within our industry. What's it like business-wise, people starting up, businesses succeeding, businesses falling away? In your opinion, what's it like? Is it just births and deaths you see constantly with all these new companies that start up?
It's really hard to generalize, but I think there's a few basic tenets about running your business or being part of a business, particularly in this sector. And I kind of use myself as an example as well, in as much as that for the last 20 odd years, I've run my own business. So I kind of feel the joys and sorrows of doing that, but also having acted for a lot of businesses, again, whose here their assets, you can tell there's quite a few sort of general truths. And one of the things that really resonated for me right at the beginning was a book called The E-Myth by, I think it was in the 80s by an American, I think he is, called Michael Gerber. And it's sort of, it's a fascinating book, but it's the basic tenet of it is said that for a business to succeed, this business needs to have three main elements or three main people or three main hats, or the hats that you need to wear. One is the entrepreneur, which is a future-focused visionary who goes and pursues opportunities and new business. The other is the manager, which is a sort of past-focused warrior, as in worry, who plans and organizes and makes sure that everything is, from an admin side, is okay. But the third one is the technician, which is someone who lives in the present, who actually does the work. And you need all three of that working at the same time to achieve success, and you can't ignore one of them. And in this industry in particular, what generally happens is that businesses, but it happens if you're a hairdresser or a carpenter or a lawyer, is that you're a good technician and you go, I'm a great marketer, I'm a great producer, I'm a great creative, I'm a great lawyer. I'm technically very good. I'm the technician. Why don't I run my own business? Because, surely I'm going to get better reward. I'm going to get more time on my hands. I'm going to spend more time with my family. I'm going to do a lot of things. I can do this. But the thing so the technician tends to be the one that starts a business. But unless you're very good about getting new business, because previously someone else did that in your business that you may have left, and unless you're good at getting new business and running the business, all of that technician work, all of that work, the reason why you actually got good at it, you find it very hard to do because you're busy doing everything else. So it's hard juggling all of those three things, and it's hard keeping those hats on. And sometimes you're not the right person to wear all three hats. And that's where I've seen a lot of things failing, is that you overburden yourself trying to do all three when in fact you're not that good at two of them. You may be a great technician, but you're just not good at running the business, or you're not good at getting new business. Again, in the industries that we're in, is that you might not want to do it yourself. You might have two or three colleagues or friends that you think, well, let's go and run a business, start an agency, start a company ourselves. And you, again, three good technicians. And if someone in that partnership isn't looking at, making sure you're getting paid, putting the bills out, all the really dull things, but important things, making sure the bills are getting paid, making sure you've got your GST in on time, making sure you've made allowances for taxes, pretty dull stuff, not nearly as exciting as going and doing a great ad for Lexus. It's really, and so that is the problem, is then you go, oh, look, we've got to hire somebody at a time when you might not have the revenue to support that hiring. And it puts extra pressures, and all of a sudden the partnership, the friendships all start fracturing because you've got that pressure.
And what's it like when you see those fractures happen? Does it get nasty?
Oh, it can.
Yeah.
It can. And it's which is kind of why right from the very get-go you need to take steps. And it sort of sound, perhaps you would expect a lawyer to say that, but you kind of do need to have things like shareholders agreements in place from the get-go. You've got to, and those agreements contemplate what happens if if it goes bad, com- uh, contemplates what happens if it goes really well, contemplates if one of you doesn't want to be a part of this anymore, contemplates if one of you gets sick and can't do it anymore, contemplates a whole range of things that could happen to you as humans along this path that you hope is a nice, long and productive and rewarding business. But everyone as humans are affected by different things. And so you've got to kind of contemplate a whole range of scenarios at the very beginning when it's the last thing you really want to be thinking about. You're just wanting to think about how I'm going to get this Lexus out, how I'm going to go and do this great thing, how I'm going to do all these wonderful creative things. I'm fettered by head office, spending more time being free and creative when you don't want to spend quality time and money with lawyers going. So tell me about where do you see yourself in 10 years and, what happens if one of you dies? Not the sort of situation. It's not the sort of thing you really want to be talking about. But you got it. You just got it.
Yes. So have the hard conversations up front, first of all. And again, now if I ask you about general advice, and I don't know, is there a disclaimer you need to put in here? Like any advice given in here is just general in nature. If you need anything, talk to an actual lawyer.
Yeah, it is. It's that we'll put that disclaimer right now. It's funny you should say that, because I when I first started my own practice, we had a visit from the insurance regulators that regulates law firms, and they said that the most common complaint against lawyers for professional negligence happens when lawyers are giving free advice over a steak at a barbecue, and so people go, "Oh, you're a lawyer. Well, I've got this problem here. What do you reckon?" And you sort of go, "Oh yeah, I'll give you the advice," and never think about it again. And then all of a sudden, people have relied on that advice. So yeah, don't rely on anything I say. My advice at the barbecues is, go and book an appointment with the lawyer. Doesn't have to be me, but just find a lawyer.
Yes.
So yeah, that's the disclaimer.
Great. So the things we talk about here are general in nature, and it's more to just give people a bit of an insight into, particularly from within the industry we're in, just give them a bit of insight and a bit of thought. If they're actually wanting to go down a certain endeavour, or if they're actually already in the endeavour and they, haven't considered probably some legal questions. Let me just go back to what you were talking about with businesses, and when they do start, and when they do, things don't go, they don't have those conversations up front. What do you say to somebody when they're in the thick of it and things aren't going well, and you've got, clashing factions either side? What do you say to those people in those circumstances about how to get through it, or what's best, what steps? Or is it more like, hey guys, you need to be like a couple here, or a relationship, you need to actually sit and talk and work through these things?
Yeah, it's the latter. You've really got to, because it might be a great business, and it could well be something that should continue and might continue differently, but it does need to change. So it is a bit of a relationship counselling, and that sometimes is a role that I've done over the years of trying to get the emotion out of it, because a lot of it is emotional, a lot of it is hurt and ego and a whole range of non-business factors, and so sometimes you can try to be that sort of mediator or counsellor, if you like. But I've also had businesses that have actually got proper qualified counsellors to actually do that, to actually try and identify what the issue is or what the problem is. And it generally is quite clear about what those things are once everyone who's got away from the emotion, got away from the hurt, and actually got to the core of what's the problem. And some of those problems are things that can't be solved, and so then you have to find an elegant way to wind things up, or sell out or find another partner or and there's a whole range of different options. And sometimes, and I know this, absolutely from my own experience, but also from countless of these types of businesses that have gone and thrived, and, businesses like life, has highs and lows, and so when you're in those lows, you often can't see the wood for the trees. And so it often does help to get someone independent who all of you trust, to actually say a bit of tough love perhaps, but also to be able to try and get to the nub of, if there's a problem, what that problem is.
Can I ask you, what's the percentage of people that come to you for advice before something has reached, a crisis, versus the people after things, shit's hit the fan? What percentage do you find you have people come to you at? What stage?
I'd love it to be the other way around, but it's like 95% of
Wow.
times when things, maybe the shit hasn't quite hit the fan, but it's and it's not too late, but it's late.
Mm.
And but I get it. It's like me going to the dentist. I feel very vulnerable. I know it's going to hurt like hell, and so I'll put it off. I'll put it off until I've got a root canal that I can't walk from. But had I actually sort of manned up a bit and gone, actually, this is money I've got to spend, and I'd get a proper checkup more regularly, then I won't go into that crisis. But it's kind of an emotional experience, because just like I do, this dentist analogy works a lot, because I get it, and I get the fact that it's not something that you really want to go out of your comfort zone into a space that you're really, really ill at ease. When you're starting and running your own business, there's a feeling often that you're very isolated, and you're feeling sometimes that you're alone, and sometimes you don't want to, partner, or you're with all of this, all of the trials and tribulations of running a business. And so having someone who's trusted, whether that's paid or, whether you're on hourly rate or whatever it is, having that extra person in your court that's committed to you and someone you trust is I think absolutely fundamental. And I have them now, but I wished I'd had that 20 years ago, because it would have made life so much easier. I might even have kept my hair, and can't promise that. But
Well, I know we were chatting just a little bit before we jumped on here. How important is it for anybody who starts a business or goes into business for themselves in any way to have an exit strategy?
I think it's fundamental, and again, it's part of that sort of shareholders or joint venture agreement that you look at the beginning, and it's a really interesting conversation. And I've seen it. That's what I've seen, and this happens more often than you'd think, is that you've got prospective 2 or 3 or 4 people who are friends or colleagues, and thinking about going in this together. And this is before you've put anything to paper, before you've done anything, before you've designed your logo and stuff like that. You've gone, so what do I want out of this business? What do I want to be, and what do I want, and where do I want it to go? What's my exit strategy? And you'd be just amazed how many, probably you would be amazed, but put 2 or 3 people together, almost invariably you've got 2 or 3 or 4 different ideas of what an exit looks like. And again, it's a function of your age, your stage, what type of person you are, what sort of where you are in the life cycle, and it's those conversations right at the very beginning that are kind of difficult conversations to have sometimes, but the exit is part of that, because if you want to sell for millions, then that's great. But if you just want to build a business that continues to provide you with an income forever, that's great too. That's an exit in itself, is that you continue to produce income until you don't need it anymore and it stops. That's just as a legitimate exercise than selling to WPP for $200 million.
So let's take a bit of a focus and put it towards, production in a
Sure.
sense. Let's talk about production companies, sole traders, people who are working in that space. When starting or when entering into it, what's some considerations? Now, again, for everybody at home, this advice is general in nature. Please seek out a qualified lawyer if you have any other questions. But when you are starting a business within the production area, in your opinion, what are some of the legal thoughts you should be considering?
I think that probably the most important thing is just making sure your contracting is clear. It doesn't mean you have to enter into 25-page documents with everybody that you deal with, but it means that you need to have something. So if you're a production company, you need to have documentation with your suppliers, with your own freelancers, with your own subcontractors, as well as with, if you're contracting with an agency or if you're contracting straight with a client. And again, these contracts don't have to be overburdensome things, but what they do need to do is they need to cover really clear things about responsibilities, who's going to be responsible for providing what, when you're getting paid, what happens if you don't provide stuff, what happens if something goes wrong, who's responsible for it. And they're pretty common, but it's often so common that you're either your contracting or your paperwork doesn't exist, or it's really not enough. Mm-hmm. Even its most basic, if you are a designer or a freelance designer or a subcontractor, and you don't have an agreement in writing with the company that you're working for, so you're providing creative work, designs or anything creative, so nothing's in writing, you still own the copyright. So you need to have something in writing for the legal ownership to actually pass. Doesn't matter if you're paid. If there's nothing in writing, you still own the copyright. So, and I've come across situations where the ultimate client is saying, "Great, could you show me? I'm assuming I own everything that I've paid for, but three steps down the line, there wasn't any paperwork. So actually, they didn't." And so the initial creative was going, "Well, no, I still own it." So they were holding the production company over a barrel, who was holding the agency over the barrel. And the agency was having really very unhappy conversations with the client, who going, "Well, I've paid you a lot of money. I got to own it. I can do anything I want." So that happens more often than it should. So it's just getting that paperwork sorted is the most important thing, without question.
So what about emails then, and an email trail? Can something just as general outlined in an email be classified as a contract?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The contracts can be verbal. They can be, you don't actually have to have something in writing for a contract to exist. You just need offer and acceptance. The reason why you have something in writing is because you need, if it's down the track, if you need to give evidence of that offer and acceptance, you'll need something in writing. Otherwise, it'll just be based on what you recall, and sometimes people recall things differently, particularly over time. And so emails are absolutely, you've got an offer and acceptance. It's evidenced in writing. That evidence is in an email. The problem often that can lead to problems, because sometimes the emails aren't as full as you'd like on all of the things that are important. So you've got to So you've got, for instance, an email that says you'll deliver this by then, and I'll pay you this by then. It doesn't doesn't cover who owns the IP. Perhaps it doesn't cover what happens if something goes wrong, or if the ultimate client doesn't like it, or if there's some sort of infringement of the IP that's been handed over. Things can be a bit unclear, but as a legal document, as legally binding contract, if you've got offer and acceptance, that's enough. Just proving what the terms of that offer and acceptance can be.
Yeah, great. And production companies, again, you would assume if you go into business as a production company, you would have these contracts sorted and you would be using them. I guess it's also great for a contractor. So individuals who are being contracted to go and work or subcontracting, make sure that they have got everything detailed of what they're going to do and what they're going to pay, or be paid for for the services they're providing.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And like I said, it doesn't need to be an overblown document. It just needs to be sufficiently clear for everybody to be. So, the test is, if you've got someone who's just walked off the street and you show them the documents, they'll go, do you understand what each party was providing? Clear enough. And that's really the test.
Now, let's stick with a freelancer or a contractor.
Yeah.
Detailing everything in a contract or an email, payment terms. Is there anything anywhere that is defined legally of what payment terms are? How long it takes for somebody to be paid?
No, not really. It's all to do, and it varies from payer to payee, and that's the sort of things that you definitely need to have in your exchange of documents, or in the detail, because there's nothing standard. There's not there are industry standards that occur over time and have been in over time, but again, it changes agency from agency. It changes. The larger agencies have much longer payment terms because they're run by maybe an offshore overseas head office or whatever. But it's so the way to put your payment terms is right up front. Right up front. Make sure that there's an understanding about what happened, how much you get paid on signature, when you get paid, if you're being paid by installments, when those installments are, whether that's dependent on whether you're dependent on time, or whether it's dependent on deliverables, and whether there's clarity of the deliverables that you do. What happens if there's cancellation by the client or cancellation by you? And again, they're really important things, but often are missed, because sometimes you're just keen to get the job and you go, great, let's get the job, let's get it in, let's get everyone working, and we'll sort it all out later. Sometimes that doesn't work.
And I know, speaking from experience from being a freelancer or, subcontractor with myself, particularly it's with agencies, you get lined up for work and I'm reluctant to put in certain information because you don't want to scare people off. But, if they've got you and they've put you on hold and they're like, yes, you've got the job, and you've said no to other work, and then it comes to like a day before and they go, sorry, job's over, you don't get it. It's a tricky one, I know, but in those circumstances, you would be well within your rights to be like, hey, I've got a bit of you're engaging me into this work, or you're putting me on hold to start at a certain date. I've got something in writing that I just want you to be aware of. Can that be used to cover you so that, and if a job does fall over, that you have grounds to go back to them and say, you know what, you've just cost me so much. Can I, is there a remuneration for me missing out? Have you seen that? Is it possible? Is it industry standard to do that?
I've certainly seen it, and it is possible, and it's possible if you have it upfront from the get go.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your initial exchanges, you go, great, I'm on hold. I'll happily be on hold. Um, but if you cancel or if you don't commit within X days, then you'll be entitled to a percentage of the job.
Mm.
So, and if they go, okay, I'll put you on hold for that on that terms, then you've got the offer and acceptance.
Mm.
Whether you enforce that, because you might think, well, maybe I don't want to get them offside,
Mm.
or that's entirely up to you and whether you get the commercial arrangements.
Mm.
But it's all really, that's why you've got to have, like, like when you're starting the business, have the hard conversations up front, and, and, you know, this advice comes all the time,
Mm.
in as much the really hard conversations could mean that you lose the job. But
Mm.
if you lose the job, and if it's a job that actually you might, it might not be good for you, then you kind of lost nothing,
Mm.
you know. And it's a sort of thing also happens a lot in other respects, particularly with creative people who are, you know, they're not paid immediately, and they go, oh yeah, I'll pay you later, I'll pay you later, and there needs to be an understanding and a respect from the get go,
Mm.
and you don't want to be difficult, and you don't want to be too militant about it, but
Mm.
you've got to, you demand, you demand to be respected, and you demand to be, and you should be treated with respect.
Mm.
And having those hard conversations up front will kind of tell you whether you will be treated with respect now or down the track.
Um, liability, two sides of it.
Yeah,
Liability when it comes to production companies,
yeah,
reliability when it comes to the individual or the contractor.
yeah.
Production company side first, who's liable if something goes wrong on a shoot? Now, is it the production company's sole responsibility, or because the client is hiring them, does any of the onus fall on the client at all?
Generally is the production company's responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's there can be things that vary that, and in terms of depends kind of what the going wrong is due to.
Mm.
If there's something, and again, we're assuming that none of this is covered in the contract,
Mm.
and in any event, a lot of the contracts that you would have would be saying, well, you know, you broke it, you fix it, type of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if there is some sort of intervention or some sort of responsibility or some sort of contributory negligence or intervening factor that causes the problem
Mm.
from another party, which could be the client or could be the agency or could be contractor, um, then that liability could be shared.
Mm-hmm.
But your first position is that it's you're being paid to deliver or do the job.
Mm-hmm.
And if you fail to do that through a whole range of things that may or may not be your fault, generally you're going to be held responsible. And it only is relevant if then you can put some sort of spread that risk or spread that blame to another party.
And when it comes to a production company, what sort of liability insurance or what sort of insurances should you be getting yourself to cover you?
Well, the sort of insurance that they're the usual sorts of insurances. I mean, there's a public liability
Mm-hmm.
insurance which covers if anybody is hurt or on the shoots. There may well be some sort of professional indemnity which covers if there's some sort of negligence on your part.
Mm-hmm.
There might be film on more filmic things. Some of the television work that I do in long form television, there's errors and omissions, which covers a whole range of liabilities, which can be ranging from copyright infringement to and physical damage or terror alerts or something like that. So the public liability tends to be your main one, and again, part of your suite of good people to have on your side is an insurance broker.
Mm-hmm.
And insurance is incredibly expensive at the moment. And post-COVID, it's very tricky. But good insurance broker is someone who'll be able to assess your need and assess the likelihood of these risks and be able to advise you about whether you can insure against those risks. Also be able to help you to the extent of your employee liability, because there's workers' compensation as insurance as well, which I also should have mentioned earlier.
So they're the insurances for production companies. If you are, and I'm going to bring this back around to when you're on a shoot and something happens, but if you're a contractor, what sort of insurances should you be getting for yourself as well? Public liability, I'm assuming, is one.
Yeah, it would. It depends how you contract. If you're a individual that is being engaged even on a contract basis by a production company, you tend to be covered by the production company's public liability and workers' compensation insurance.
Mm-hmm.
But you definitely need to check that on each gig. If you're working through your own company, then you should own and take out public liability insurance.
Yeah. And then it brings me back around to, let's just say something does happen heaven forbid, something does happen on a shoot. And again, we've covered that ultimately, in general terms, the production company is the one who is executing the job for the client. So they are responsible for what's happening and the people on it. If something does happen and you're a contractor and something, let's just say you put some piece of equipment through a window, you would assume that the public liability insurance of the production company would cover that individual for that accident that happened?
Normally it would. Normally it wouldn't, unless there's additional factors but generally it would. And that's to damage to property. If there's damage to employees or contractors, then you're coming under a sort of work health and safety regime that is both covered compulsorily because it's covered by each state. Contractors would be covered by that as well. So the general position is that the production company would cover those freelancers, but you do need to make sure right at the beginning whether you are or not, because just sometimes they're not.
And I guess it's that risk tolerance as well. Some people are pretty blasé and think it may not happen to me. Other people certainly think about it. Anything that could land you in jail or land you with paying a big sum of money, they're probably the instances that we don't want to happen. So you would probably, I know that I do that. I guard against the things that could incur those two factors.
Very wise. Very wise. Yes.
Well,
or sort of take you off, injure you, take you out of being able to earn and run your business. So you need to have some protection for yourself, but also from hurting others from being able to continue their work.
I've got one production company-wise, locations. When securing locations, sometimes it's just been a verbal agreement, but why is it important to secure an actual location agreement when you are shooting on private property?
Well, I think that there's sort of both a legal and a practical point of view. The legal position is that you as a property owner have the absolute right to say yes or no to whatever happens on your property.
Mm-hmm.
And so if someone comes onto my front garden and takes films in my front garden, I, as a property owner, have the right to kick them off. Indeed, anything that they produce from that, I could prevent. However, if they were standing on the street doing the same filming, that's quite different. So they don't need my permission to film my house from the street. But if they came in through the front, then they would, and they do need that permission. If you are standing on public property, then you need to have permission from the council. So it's sort of, you do need, it is important to get, and it's also really important to get it in writing, because, and this happens a lot, is that if you've got releases both from talent and from property owners just on tape, you just prevent yourself from, everything's in the can, and then before you're about to broadcast, the property owner goes, "Oh no, actually, I never said you could come." So you need to be saying, "Well, actually, we have your signed release, we have your permission."
And I guess it's important to have permissions down the line, purely because instances like people can say, "Hey, I don't give you permission, and I don't want you to show it," so then that can halt whatever you're doing. But then also, I guess it comes back to if anything actually does go wrong, because I know that there are some times, particularly smaller production companies, that like to go guerrilla, is the term used, and not seek the certain approvals. Let's say you're filming on council land and you haven't got the right approvals. You produce whatever the content is that you produce, and someone comes along a bit later and says, "Hey, did you have permission for that?" In a legal sense, what could they do from their perspective against you or your company or whoever the production partners were who were putting said project together?
Well, I guess at its most extreme, they could stop you. They could injunct you, and they could take proceedings to stop you, that it was based on, because it was unauthorized filming. There's probably a middle ground where you'd, before they resort to that, they'd hit you for a fine, and that fine would be more than what it would have cost you to go there in the first place. But sometimes the fine is worth it, because they might not have said they would in the first place. So I get it. I get the way that it can be quite burdensome to go through in getting permissions like that. And I think that we'd always say you just got to get the permissions, because you are at risk, and that risk can be huge.
They can be costly, no doubt. What about delays to production from a production company standpoint? If you're on a shoot, involves travel, let's say a piece of equipment that you stuck underneath the carriage of one of our great carriers, they've lost it. You're at the other end and you're wanting to shoot and you can't do anything because you don't have the right equipment. Who covers that? Who covers that cost? Yeah,
it's a really interesting question, because effectively there's a sort of chain of pain, really, in as much as ultimately, if you're unable to do what you said you would in the time that you said you would do it by, then you as the production company, it's your responsibility, it's your problem. And so if for whatever reason and those reasons were beyond your control, like losing it in an airplane or something, then ultimately you're responsible, but then you would have the opportunity to then go to whoever was the source of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a little bit like I was saying earlier, in as much as the responsibility can be shared, but it sort of is a chain of pain that you have to go, well, I suffered this loss because ultimately I'm responsible. I suffered the loss, but that loss was due to you and to you or to you. And so I'm now going to you and to you and to you for you to compensate me for the loss that I've suffered. But for instance, the ultimate client who I've said I'll deliver this to, they're not going to bother going to all of those other things. They're just going to go to you. They're saying, well, I don't want to hear your excuse. They might be good excuses, but at the end of the day, you've got to sort it out.
Just to follow on from that, with airlines, is there any grounds that you can chase them legally for compensation, or is it already written into their terms and conditions when you buy the ticket that they've got their get out of jail free card written in there?
Yeah, I haven't looked at that in particular of late, but almost certainly they would have, and generally they would exclude things like consequential loss, and which this is. They would, so if they lost a camera, normally they would be responsible for replacing that camera, but they wouldn't be responsible for the money that you generated because you would have liked to have used that camera and couldn't. So, and again, we all buy tickets, and without looking at those terms of carriage, but absolutely that would be included.
So I would say probably to anybody who is travelling with airlines, probably carry everything on you, or if you have some sort of backup at the other end, that would be my thinking and planning.
That's right.
When you do, just backing up, just talking about amounts now.
Yeah,
I know this being sole trader or being a contractor, liability amounts. Sometimes there's 10 million, sometimes there's 20 million. Why do companies require it, or individuals for that matter, in liability coverage? And who determines that amount?
Well, generally it's the insurance companies that it sort of starts with them, and I think that the coverage limits have really increased a lot, particularly over COVID, and the shift from 10 million to 20 million is kind of the standard, the new normal. And that's generally because there's been a whole range, because of the claims and the costs of insurance. And so the 20 million, as I said, is tends to be now the new normal of the policies that are available. The client would ultimately be the one who sets the amount of liability coverage that they require of the production company, and
that's informed to them from their insurer, correct? Yep.
So what you don't want if you're the ultimate client who's got 20 million of coverage, you don't then want to pass on something lower than that. You don't want to find that there's a gap in between, and so it's just. I mean, insurance premiums have gone up enormously, and the costs of getting insurance and the ability to get insurance have been much more difficult. Hence the reason I was saying earlier about having good insurance broker is really helpful, and they are, because it's not so straightforward these days, and you need to shop around quite a lot, and there are options around that you do need to shop quite hard.
So, Stephen, we're gonna wrap this up now. Tell people about your services, where they can find you, because I'm sure there's plenty of people in the industry after listening to this who would love to seek some legal advice. So, tell the people where they can find you.
Thank you for that. As I said, I've very much enjoyed talking with you, and it's nice to be able to share some of the war stories, the good and the bad, with everyone. That you can certainly go to my website at digbylaw.com, and by all means hit us up, either just give us a call or send us an email, and be happy to help. But thank you very much. I've really enjoyed sharing this with you.
Yes, Stephen, well, it's been great. It really has. It's so good to get to talk to an actual person, an actual lawyer within the realm where we work and operate, just to gain some insight and to get probably people thinking as well, Stephen. Like you said, 95%, I think these were your words, come to you when it is nearly hitting the fan, whereas there could probably be a lot of heartache and a lot of pain mitigated if they had it up front and thought about these and considered and actually sought legal advice. So I thank you so much for jumping on. Thanks so much for sharing with us. Really, really great, insightful. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Well, that's it for today. I'll make the logo bigger. Thanks for hanging out with us. We've shared some insights and stories that I hope you found useful. Whether you're just getting started or diving deeper into ad production, there's always more to explore. Keep listening, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with some more from the world of production. Take care until then.